You are listening to episode 211 of the Autism Mom Coach. Back to school, how to answer the what-if questions keeping autism moms up at night. Hi, I'm Lisa Candera, mother to an 18-year-old son with autism and founder of the Autism Mom Coach. Through years of trial and error, I have created tools that have helped me stop escalating meltdowns, make impossible decisions, and advocate more effectively for my son. I've now coached over 100 moms through these same struggles. In this podcast, I share everything I've learned and what I am still learning with you. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am so glad you are here, and I hope you are doing well. Last week, in the first episode of the Back to School series, I talked about shifting your mindset from bracing to acceptance and from fear to focus, and doing that over and over again. This week is all about the mechanics. I am going to give you a protocol, step by step, how to answer the questions that are keeping you up at night, those what-if questions that send you into a spin. Before we get to the protocol, let's first talk about why what-if questions keep you stuck. The reason is that what-if questions are not questions we are actually trying to answer. We are not applying our highest level of thinking when we are spinning in the what-ifs. And this is not surprising because what-if questions usually bring up a lot of fear and anxiety. And when you're in that fight-flight state of mind, you don't have access to your highest level of thinking. And so if you never go beyond the what-if and spend the time putting your brain to work to find solutions, you're going to stay stuck. And this is a big deal. There is a cost to staying in this loop. First of all, our bodies do not know the difference between imagined and real. So when you are imagining and anticipating that what-if disaster, your body is experiencing that fight, flight, stress response, the same one that would be triggered if the thing actually happened. But instead of experiencing it only if and when it happens, you are experiencing it over and over, multiple times a day, for days, for weeks. Not surprisingly, this takes a toll on your energy, your confidence, and it keeps you stuck in chronic stress responses. Second, and this is the real part of autism parenting, some of the things that you are worried about, they do happen, and you need to deal with them. But when you have spent your time looping and dreading instead of preparing and strategizing, you're less capable of responding effectively if and when the thing happens. The counter strategy to move to the what-if decision loop is decisions ahead of time. They are decisions that you make before the stressful thing happens, so that you can make it from a place of safety, reasonableness, and judgment. Otherwise, the thing happens, your adrenaline spikes, and in that state, it's easy to freeze, to go blank, to have no idea what to do, or to overreact. And that is what the decisions ahead of time is all about. It is taking the time now to consider your options and your next steps for the moments that you reasonably believe might happen. When your kid refuses to get out of bed in the morning, when it takes her 20 minutes to get dressed because her clothes do not feel right, when you get that call from the school about a behavior, when your child holds it together all day at school and then loses it the moment they walk in the door. When these moments happen, you will still feel that burst of adrenaline. You might even freeze for a few seconds, and that's okay. That is your body doing its job, and you have patterned a response. So The fact that you are freezing, that you are getting that jolt of adrenaline, it's not a sign that anything is wrong or that you are in actual danger. It's the patterned response. But with decisions ahead of time, you can feel that initial adrenaline jolt and remind yourself, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen, but here's what I decided to do in this moment. The difference here is that you have a plan, and this is a plan that you made from a calm and grounded state. So you know what to do, even if you don't want to do it. Things like holding a boundary, leaving work early, disagreeing with someone at an IEP table, waiting out a meltdown doesn't feel comfortable. But when you're making that decision ahead of time from the grounded state, you're choosing on purpose to feel the discomfort instead of freezing, panicking, or overreacting. And the reason that you're deciding to feel that discomfort is because you want to respond in these different moments effectively. But how? How to go from what if catastrophizing to a decision ahead of time. Now, for this, I have created a protocol for myself to make this as concrete as possible. And I did this because I've had a lot of those moments where I've gotten the jolt of adrenaline, I felt the freeze or the urge to overreact. And after it happened enough times, I told myself I need something that I can focus my brain on, almost like a decision tree, so that I am not constantly in this what do I do spin. Add to that, being a coach, I've coached my clients through a lot of the things that I've experienced. Things like, waiting out that meltdown in public, calling 911 on your child, the decision to inpatient hospitalizations, fights with insurance companies. These are all things that I've done and I've worked with my clients with. And so I really have worked hard to take all of my experiences and distill them down into a step-by-step protocol that is useful, that is concrete, and that I can use. And hopefully, I hope that you can use this too, and that it helps you shift from that freezing to I have a plan. I know what to do. Okay, so how did this protocol come about? Shortly after my son Ben, who is now almost 19 years old, turned 13, our lives got really challenging. COVID, puberty, middle school, his anxiety was sky high, his OCD was out of control, and he was becoming aggressive towards me and himself. He was hospitalized for the first time ever in September 2020, and then shortly after that, he was outplaced from our school district to a smaller school. At this point, it was clear and undeniable that his mental health was deteriorating, and I was flooded with what ifs. Things like, what if he refuses to go to school? What if he gets aggressive? What if I have to call 911? What if I have to have him readmitted to inpatient hospitalization? What if insurance does not cover his stay? What if he gets kicked out of his outplacement school? And unfortunately, I've lived through many of these what ifs more than once, which is, again, why this protocol exists. The reality is that after you live through this once or twice, you have a proof of concept that a worst case scenario for you can happen, and that they are not only survivable, they sometimes are the thing that gets you where you need to be. Like, for example, if your kid is melting down at school day in and day out, they have tons of anxiety in school, maybe that's the thing that gets them outplaced to a school that can better handle their needs. Anyhow, being an attorney and a very process-oriented person, I wanted to map these things out based on what I had learned from them happening already, and really just give myself a clear path of what to do, what not to do, so that it was something that when I was in a panic, I could turn to and focus on. All right, so let's get into the 5-step protocol. Step 1, clearly define the problem or issue. In step 1, you take your vague, overly broad what if and turn it into a very precise situation that you are concerned about. You get factual: who, what, when, where. Data over drama. So instead of what if I have to call 911 and spinning in fear and shame, it is me defining the circumstances that would cause me to call 911 in the first place. So the clear statement here would be, if Ben is being unsafe towards himself or me, I will call 911. What if he refuses to go to school? Another what if. What if he refuses to go to school? Now, when you're doing this, you also need to base it on your experiences with the situation. And so for my situation with Ben, there was always a lot of threatening not to go to school, but he would eventually get there. So the issue here was there may be days or stretches of time when Ben resists getting ready, getting on the van to go to school, and just all together having a meltdown in the morning as he resists. But he eventually does always, usually he got on the van. Now, by making the issue as specific as possible, you can start to identify possibilities, troubleshoot, and develop strategies. And this is the entire point of getting factual. Vagueness keeps you stuck. Specifics move you forward. So step 1 is always to define the issue, fear, problem as clearly as possible. Next, step 2, rate it. In this step, you are going to rate how likely it is and how big of a problem this actually would be. When I look at how likely a scenario is, I like to divide it into 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is very likely. This is something you are rating based on past experiences or a new development you already know about. This is based on your child, your circumstances, so this will be different person to person. For example, before Ben turned 13, the idea of hospitalizations and out-of-district placements were not on my radar. I was not even aware of them. But since then, the idea of hospitalizations or finding a new school for us is in the likely bucket solely based on experience. This just means it is something I want to be cognizant of. I want to have a plan. I want to know my next steps and my options. Bucket number 2 is likely. This is the ordinary friction of the school year for children with autism. So things like IEP issues, behavioral or social challenges, difficulty with transitions, routine changes, increased expectations. None of it is guaranteed, but then none of it would surprise you either. So examples of this are things like phone calls from the school, in-school meltdowns, struggling with group projects, struggling in gym, IEP disagreements, misunderstandings about your kiddo's behavior, after-school meltdowns. And then finally, bucket number 3 is not likely. This is the fear that has never actually happened or happened once inside a very specific circumstances that are not in front of you anymore. Say, for example, you used to get a lot of calls about your child's behavior on the bus, but this year your kid's not going to be on the bus, so you don't really need to worry about that, right? Or maybe you are afraid your tween child will be bullied because they still wear Bluey and Pug Patrol t-shirts, but this has never happened before. Or let's say you have the fear of getting fired because of spending so much time tending to your child's needs, yet your manager and your colleagues have never said a word to you about your performance, and you've been doing this for years. If it is not likely, it's not a problem that you need to solve now or maybe ever. And if it's not likely, it's certainly not something that you want to spend your mental time and energy, because you have other things to account for, those likely or very likely scenarios. Next, how big is it? Now, when something is going sideways, everything feels big and like a big deal and something that you would prefer not to happen. And that's why you have to get really in the weeds here and separate stuff that is unpleasant to deal with from things that are really big problems that would be difficult to remediate. So I like to think of it on a scale of, let's just say, 1 to 10, rating it like the way you would rate pain. All of it is uncomfortable, but not all of it is a 10. And maybe actually none of it is a 10. This is not to diminish what you're experiencing, but is to remind you to remember context. For example, for me, my son whining, complaining, stomping before school was normal, not a big problem in the context of our lives. And because I knew that, I did not treat it like a big problem. And because of that, it was a lot easier to see when things crossed the line from our typical ordinary to a bigger problem like the aggression and the elopement. The better defined the problem or issue is, the easier it will be to then move to step 3. Step 3, determine your options. This is where you take the very likely and likely and you set out your options. For this, I want you to work hard to come up with 5 options, even if some of those are options you would not choose. The reason for this is to put your brain to work finding potential solutions instead of letting your brain spin in the worst case scenarios. Next, ask yourself, what can I do right now? Take a look at your list of options and decide what you can do today. This includes things you can do to head the problem off before it happens, or build the scaffolding that will support you and your kiddo if it happens anyway. For example, if I'm concerned about handling my workload during the first week of school in the event my child struggles with a transition, I can take PTO that week. I can talk to my supervisor, I can talk to my colleagues, or maybe I can find a way to move back certain deadlines or meetings for that week to the following week. Another example regarding self-harm and aggression. What I can do now is remove sharp objects. I can talk to my neighbors about my child's struggles. I can write out a 911 script. Now, again, none of these options are ideal or preferred, but they're all possible. And they all And then next, step 5, if then. This is where you write your if-then statement. If this specific thing happens, then here's exactly what I will do. This is your action plan. If my child comes home from school mad as hell, I'm going to give them some space. If I get a phone call from the school, I'm going to ask questions and try to understand what happened before jumping in the car to pick up my child. If I don't think my child's IEP is being followed, I will communicate with his teacher and case manager. I will write a parent concern letter. I will request an emergency IEP meeting. Again, taking that what if and wouldn't this be horrible into very specific steps that you can take, refocusing your brain so that you are better equipped to strategize and to be an effective leader for your child and your family. All right, that is it for the protocol. Number 1, define the problem. Number 2, rate it. Number 3, define your options. Number 4, decide what you can do right now. And then number 5, create your if-when statements. In next week's episode, I am going to take 5 of the most common what-if questions I get from autism moms, and I am going to answer them with you from client examples using the protocol that I laid out here for you today. Before then, take this protocol and start to run some of your what ifs through it and see what you come up with. If you want to share these with me, email me at lisa@theautismmomcoach.com. I'd be happy to review them and talk with you through them and strategize with you. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. I will talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Autism Mom Coach. If you are ready to apply the principles you are learning in these episodes to your life, it is time to schedule a consultation call with me. Podcasts are great, but the ahas are fleeting. Real change comes from application and implementation, and this is exactly what we do in my one-on-one coaching program. To schedule your consultation, go to my website, theautismmomcoach.com, work with me, and take the first step to taking better care of yourself so that you can show up as the parent you want to be for your child with autism.